All right. Well, thank you guys for joining and welcome to December's edition of the Tamil Innovator Spotlight. I'm very excited to be chatting with, he doesn't consider himself famous, but he's quite famous in the Tamil community, Mr. Roy Ratnavel. Roy, thank you for jumping on and sharing your story.
Thanks, Earl. Always a pleasure to talk to you. And I know we've known each other for some time, and you've been doing some great work at all the different mediums. And so I'm very impressed and humble and honored to be here.
Thank you, Roy. I mean, I know I make an assumption here that a lot of people that will be joining today or be watching your story know your story. And maybe for the benefit of folks that are maybe a bit newer to who you are, maybe share a bit about kind of, at a high level, I would say your story is inspirational because it's you started off as a mail clerk 30 plus years ago, $16,000 salary to now EVP at CI Financial. And I think CI Financial was a small company when you started, but now it's massive. So you've kind of grown with the company, and that's, inspirational for someone sticking with the company that long and that kind of growth. But maybe in a few words or like a few sentences, maybe, tell the people a bit about, your background if I didn't ruin it already. And then we'll kind of delve into your new, your project that you have going, which is your book, and go from there.
Okay, so that's great. Thanks everybody for joining us. And yeah, I mean, just very quickly, the Reader's Digest version of my story. I think I shared this on the podcast, and I'll repeat that. I was born in Colombo, Sri Lanka, and then moved to the north, called Point Pedro, when I was very young. I grew up at in the north, went to school at Hartley College. And then during the war, I was rounded up at the age of 16, just late 16, and I was sent to prison. I spent 3 months there. And when I got out, miraculously, my father decided that there's no future for me in Sri Lanka and sent me out to Canada at the age of 18. And I came here and did just like anyone else, various different jobs when you're immigrant, and walked into, at the time called Universal Services, now known as CI Global Asset Management, tiny little asset management company on Bay Street. I started when I was 19 years old in the mailroom. And here I am 30 years later. And I jokingly always say I'm not here at CI out of loyalty, just that nobody else would hire me. But no, it's been a great ride. And that's kind of led to the book as well, in terms of just reflections that I compiled over the last 30 years of my career. And I wanted to tell the world the whole story.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good segue into, people. I mean, you've done this career for 30 plus years. You've worked in an industry that's considered traditionally more left brain or like analytical, even though you're on the sales side, which is a bit more creative. But why is now the time for you to share the story that you're writing in this book?
It's a very interesting question, but probably a long answer. In my 30s, perhaps around 35 or 36, I knew that I would one day write a book about being terrorized as a young boy who experienced a brutal civil war in Sri Lanka and then transformed in Canada in his late teens and early 20s. I wanted to tell the world this survival story, a Tamil boy survival story. It's really not just my story. In the end, it's really a collective story of Tamil who left Sri Lanka due to the war and going to friendlier shores. So though there have been a few books published through reputable publishers, and some are self-published, I felt they really hadn't captured the collective Tamil sentiment around our struggle and our journey. So I wanted this book to give a voice to a generation of Tamil immigrants who are, I'd say, coming of age now in Canada and other Western nations, and tell the untold story of them. And when I say of them, of us collectively, and or their parents leaving Sri Lanka and their experiences prior to arriving on friendlier shores to build a better future. So also, I wanted to tell our collective story to reach a wider audience by appealing to those who have experienced genocide and ethnic cleansing beyond just our Tamil community. At least, at the very least, I want to document my family story so the future generation of Ratnavel clan will know what happened to their ancestors. So that was really the reason I wanted to document this, and pitch ended up being a larger project than I originally envisioned.
Yeah, I think when we talked about it beforehand, I mentioned this is kind of a trait that I want to instill in my kids. But I think anybody that, leaves a country they're familiar with for like most of their life to a place completely new that maybe won't initially, welcome them with like, open arms. I think you have to develop a certain level of kind of resiliency to really survive and thrive in that kind of, I guess, environment or like setting. So in terms of the word resiliency, what does that word mean to you? And like how, I feel like that could be a theme in your book based on kind of what you're describing, but maybe, yeah, talk a little bit about that and just that theme of resiliency.
All right. I mean, listen, I think the word resiliency has been defined by many better people in a better way than I could ever probably do justice to it. But to me, resiliency really means is that, look, I mean, the world is full of problems. Your life, in life, you're going to go through so many struggles and hardships and great times. And I truly believe that human beings do better in adversity than in luxury. People who grew up in luxury all their life really don't build up the resiliency muscle. And I'm not suggesting because of that people should go seek out trouble. But in my case, it was just kind of knocked on my doorstep. And so you had no other choice than to stand up to the challenges that was put in front of you and figure out a way to get out of that. And look, I'm not unique in this. I mean, if you look at the entire Tamil community, and I'm assuming you were born here, I could be wrong, maybe you came very young, but I think a lot of us, our parents went through hell to get here, to other parts of Western nations too, not just in Canada, but it really taking such risk, crossing many oceans, many nations, really to help the next generation of people to have a better life. And so for me, I think that, what really drove me is that as you know, this story, Ara, that, 2 days after I arrived in Canada at the age of 18, my father was shot and killed. So my father's untimely death left me with the feeling that I had to live for two people. I thought if I did well enough in life, somehow I could make up for the life he should have had. Because he sent me to Canada to give me a life that he never had. So I had this responsibility to honor his life. So my father's death gave me made me, I should say, my father's death made me grow up fast and become a fighter. I use that pain as coal for my furnace of ambition, per se. And to me, that's what resiliency is about, just standing up in the midst of real negative, terrible events that impacts you.
Yeah, I've heard from like various writers, when you're writing something, especially this is your own story and like it's not obviously a completely happy one. It has sort of a happy ending, but you went through like a lot of trauma to kind of get to where you are. And writing, I've heard from them, like writers is kind of therapeutic, but it's also, it can kind of be traumatic in the sense you're kind of reliving by writing out your experiences, what you went through. Was that something you went through as you're kind of, putting together this project, this book of documenting your experiences?
In terms of the cathartic nature of this thing?
Both cathartic and maybe like even, potentially even traumatic because of obviously what you went through in terms of the torture as well.
Right. Yeah, listen, it was, one of the reasons even though I wanted to write this book for many years and never kind of sat down and wrote about it, is because you really don't want to face your demons. but I do enjoy writing, as you know. I mean, I find it a stress reliever. To express my thoughts and views to the audience at large, to me, is something that that I find it interesting and fascinating, and not many times that people agree with what I have to say, and it doesn't matter. To that end, I've also written a few articles for Tamil culture. So I'm always thankful for that type of opportunities. So while I was living in Vancouver many years ago, I was contemplating the idea of writing a book, but I didn't know where to even begin. By chance, in 2009, I came across Jonathan Kay. You might know who he is. He was a comment editor at a columnist at National Post, the Canadian daily national newspaper, during the height of Sri Lankan Civil War against Tamil Tigers. So John and I were on the opposite side of the debate of this contentious war. I was for the Tamil freedom struggle, and he was against the Tamil freedom struggle. But despite the difference, John was very gracious and allowed me to explain the Tamil side. So I wrote my first ever op-ed column, March of 2009. Subsequently, I wrote 4 more columns for National Post. The war ended in, I guess, May 2009. We went our separate ways, but we kept in touch. And so John kept encouraging me to one day write a book about my experience. But, I was just hiding behind my demons. I don't want to deal with them. I don't want to bring them to surface. But it was reassuring for me, given that I already had this idea of writing the book. So it was out of our periodic discussions over the last decade of our friendship that some of the ideas explored in the books were developed. So, I moved to Toronto in July 2016. It was a career move. And then early sort of June 2018, John introduced me to a well-renowned Canadian literary agent and entertainment lawyer. We met at his office near downtown, thinking that I have a great idea for this book, but nothing came of it. The guy basically said, I don't think you have a story. So I went back to my career in the business, and the pandemic started, and I hit the world. Then during a phone conversation, John again casually mentioned to me that I should consider writing the book, and I agreed. I'm giving you this backstory because it wasn't like I just one day woke up and said, that's it, I'm writing a book. It was just a whole bunch of steps and missteps, because in September 2020, just before, remember then we went to that one more lockdown again in sort of September 2020. So John and the literary agent again met over at Greektown at the restaurant called Astoria on Danforth. So I pitched the book idea again, and the agent didn't budge. Then John suggested, why don't you just let Roy write 3 chapters, and if you're not happy, we'll go our separate ways. Surprisingly, he agreed. And so I started writing, say April 2021. And then in a few weeks, I wrote 3 chapters, about 22,000 words, and The Prisoner 1056 was born. Yeah, it was a very cathartic experience and traumatic. And there are days, broke down writing it, thinking about the things that happened to my family, to me, which I always say that pushed my therapist to a higher tax bracket because of all the visits I made to his office. But yeah, it was an exciting, traumatic, cathartic, therapeutic, all in one.
And why did you choose the title? Because, with the book, it's like an article, like the title is one of the key things that draw people in.
Right.
So why choose that title, Prisoner, 1056?
Okay, without giving the book too much away, but basically the operational liberation was the war between Tamil Tigers and Sri Lankan government in May of 1987. And Then they rounded up about 2,700 of us in the Vadamarachi region, right? And then they split us up into 52 groups in prison and assigned each other a prison number. And now you can guess what my prison number was. It's 1056. So I was known as prisoner 1056, no names. So it's almost like they stripped away your identity. So for me, that is a very important moniker in my life. And so I thought I should name the book title as Prisoner 1056.
Got it. And I'll just take a quick break here. Like for anybody that's listening, I see you, Prat. You know, if you guys have any questions, feel free to type it in the chat. And I think at the end, we'll have some time to maybe ask 1 or 2 questions. Yeah, I guess you talked about, you try to pitch this idea of the book a couple of times, it got rejected. And finally, the potential solution was, hey, let's just write a couple of chapters and let's just pitch it like almost like what you do with the movie, where you kind of write a few scenes before you kind of work on the bigger project.
Right.
How did you because for someone that's never written a book before and you don't do that professionally, how did you even know how to start putting together the draft, organizing your thoughts? How did you do all of that?
That's a great question, because you are right. I mean, I've written stuff, but not a book. And so so this is sort of a funny story, but also a teachable moment for me, because when I was given the opportunity to write, but when my agent said to me, yeah, just go write 3 chapters and then we'll talk. I thought, oh, hey, it should be easy. So after the meeting with that agent a few months later, first you have to do a book proposal. So John, my friend, Jonathan Kay, voluntarily wrote 3,000 words, long proposal, an incredibly detailed, amazing book proposal, by the way, well written, really talked about what this book will exactly be like. So that's the outline, right, in your head, thinking, okay, so now I got to write a book that matches the book proposal. But on the other hand, I didn't know where to begin. So finally, I mustered up my courage and wrote 1,000 words, sample chapter, and sent it to my friend John for his review. He replied through email stating, this reads like a blog, not like a book. And then he said, you need to bring your reader into your world, set the scene, tell them what your mother cooked, where did you go to school, and what kind of animals you saw growing up, stuff like that. They say in writing, sight, scene, and sense, the 3 S's. So you have to set the scene. So my first attempt at writing a book was a colossal failure. So I gave up. And a few months later had gone by, I tried to abandon my literally ambition, but I did so with the consciousness that failing at this wasn't my true nature, and that sooner or later, I'll have to settle down and write a book. Also, I knew that I had the facility with words and the power of facing my unpleasant facts. And I felt that this created sort of a private world in which I could get into it to confront my ugly past correctly. And I knew it would be, as I said earlier, therapeutic and cathartic, which ended up being the case. So months later, it was Easter Sunday, April 2021. After dinner and a few scotches, I found my liquid inspiration to pen my first sentence of the book, which started like this. There are some places that will surprise you. That was the first thing I ever wrote in my book. And I began. It was about 9:30 at night. By 6 o'clock in the morning, when I finished, I had written about 7,000 words. Chapter 1 was done. A week later, chapter 2, then chapter 3, the words started pouring onto the pages like a dam had broken. In total, I had written about 22,000 words, 3 chapters. So 35 years of memory, heartache, trauma spewed onto, in a matter of weeks, basically let my fingers dance on the keyboard to the pain of my past and then onto the word document. It really was very therapeutic.
Yeah, you just hit on a theme that I think is quite important, which is a lot of people think of a task and they make it much bigger in their head than it has to be. So it could be something like writing a book, but every book starts with a word or a sentence. And for you, you started, just by writing, and then it turned, one sentence turned into 22,000 words. So that's just kind of something that I want to highlight that I think is quite important, because they say momentum is everything. So even like for going to the gym, people always say, I don't have the time, etc. But they say just start 5 minutes a day. Just go to the gym, sit there, do a set, run for 5 minutes, and then go back. So just want to highlight that. So you took the 3 chapters you wrote as promised that you were supposed to deliver to, I guess, the publisher. So what happened after that? So you got this complete, and then what's next?
Yeah, it wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. So I sent it into Michael, my agent, and he, I haven't heard from him for some time. And then on May 18th, so literally about a week and a half later, maybe 2 weeks later, my phone rang, and it was the call I was waiting for. Nervously answered, and the agent was on the other line, and he said, "Roy, I was moved by the first 3 chapters. It moved me to tears. As a Jew, I can relate to this story really well." And then he said, music to my ears, he said, "I believe you don't have a book, you have an international book. I'd love to represent you if you let me." That was the one he said. But the thing is, though, Hera, is what a day to receive such a message, because it was May 18th. If you know, that's the Mullivakal Remembrance Day, a remembrance day observed by Tamils worldwide to remember those who died in the final stages of Sri Lankan war. So I insisted to him, I want to sign the contract on the very same day. And I wanted him to become my literary agent and a lawyer. His name is Michael Levine of Westwood, creative artist, officially became an agent on that day. And he finally said, "Don't you want to send it to your lawyer?" I said, "First of all, I don't have a lawyer. And second of all, if I don't trust you, then we shouldn't even be talking." So I'm not writing this book to make money, and although I'm not opposed to making money, but nobody gets rich from making money, writing books. It's I want to tell our story to the world, and I want to donate as much as whatever we make on this book to most of it to charity. And so he became my agent. I was so thrilled. And then he said to me, "I want you to go back and write the rest of the chapters, because if you still in my office at home, I have all the chapters named." So as soon as I sat down, I wrote a story arc, how the story is going to go. I wrote all the chapters named. I had 10 chapters, ended up being 12 chapters, but originally it was 10. And he said, "Just go write the next 7 chapters." So I wrote the next 7 chapters. It took me literally 60 days to finish the book. So I wrote about 90,000 words in 60 days. I was just crushing it every night. And the COVID really helped, because we were all working from home. So I had no travel time. There was no dinner, because the Monday to Thursdays I'm always out dinner somewhere. And this really had me at home 100% of the time. And as soon as I'm done work at 6 or whatever the time usually I do, and I had 5-6 hours every night to write a book. And so that really helped. I think without COVID, this would have been hard to write. And so 60 days, I got it done and sent the chapters into Michael. And basically he was sending it to, he sent to 17 or 16 publishers, because he's got a Rolodex of people he knows in the industry. He sent it to them, and out of the 16, 6 replied, and 4 said, "Thank you, but no thank you." and two of them said we're interested, and then one of them, which is a smaller publisher, dropped off, and then Penguin said we love it. So that's how we wrote a contract with Penguin, and the rest was history.
Yeah, I think Michael Levine's a big deal as well. I think he mentioned that he brought Life of Pi to life, I think, right, as an agent.
Yeah, I mean, he had, he was behind many great writers. Mordecai Riesler, he represented him. He represented the author of Life of Pi, and then Rohinton Mistry is another great writer. So he's got an extensive list of great writers in his portfolio. So I'm actually very honored that he would take an unknown amateur writer like me as his client, and he's been nothing but an amazing addition to my journey.
Out of curiosity, I mean, especially since this is your first book, why did you pursue the path of like working with a publisher versus, more and more writers this age are kind of trying to go the self-publishing route? So did you ever consider that? And like, if so, like, what was that decision making
And
like?
like I said, I was going to first document our family story. And so if nobody picked up this book, I would have self-published it for sure. I have friends who have written books, and some have, but John, for an example, self-published some and also published through, various publishers. He warned me from the beginning, whatever you do, don't self-publish if you want to get circulation. And I could see why that is today, because when you go through a reputable publisher, they give you a marketing team, a PR team, they design your covers, they give you media access, they give you print media and social media access. So it is a different ballgame. And as I said, I want this book in Tamil's hands, don't get me wrong. But I want this more than that. I want this book in non-Tamil's hands. There's no point telling our own story to ourselves. I mean, I want every one of you guys to buy the book and obviously keep one for yourself, to your family and your kids down the generation. They should read it. But I want this book in the hands of non-Tamils, and anyone I gave this book to, and they can't believe this story has never been told to the world. And the best way to do it is through a reputable publisher. And Penguin, as you know, is the largest English language publisher in the world, hands down.
I have a question here from Pratt. So I guess this is summarized. He had a conversation with his mom about resiliency, and then, as like someone that's moved here from Sri Lanka and, just going through tough times and creating opportunities for their kids and going through so much. His question is, because I think he asked his mom, how did you go through all of this and still have a positive kind of outlook on things? And she didn't have an answer. So his question to you is the same: is how do you go through all this, a bunch of terrible things in your life, the torture, the loss of your father, etc., and then still maintain, seems like, a somewhat positive view on life and in the future?
Because I never met a pessimistic, successful person. And I think you could, when you read through the book, you'll see how much I beat myself up all the time. At one point, I thought it was the world's problem, not my problem. All this thing happened to me. Then you create this victim mentality, and you become, you think everything that goes wrong in your life, even if it's your own doing, you blame somebody else, and it becomes habitual. And my dad used to tell me the world has two types of problems: yours and everybody else's, and you got to fix your own. So I felt at some point I had to confront this. I called in the book, go to war with the man in the mirror, right? And create a different person. And so you have to do that. And because the longer you dwell on the past, which is hard not to, trust me. I mean, I still struggle with it, and it's always be part of you. It's in your bone marrow now. But you have to do it for your next generation. You have to do it for others. And you have a choice then, really. You can have this thing consume you and destroy you, or you can have this thing strengthen you and make you a success. And I chose the latter.
I gotta ask this because, whenever I start something, it's always like, hey, what's like the big picture or vision? And I know this is just starting off with a book and you want to get into everyone's hands, but have you ever thought of beyond this, like other projects, or even like what this book could potentially evolve into, like whether it's like movie or like other kinds of forms of expressing this story that you've written down? Have you thought about that at all, or are you just focused right now on getting the story out?
So, because if you know me at all, like once I just focus on something, I want to make sure it becomes a mega success. So right now I'm focused on how do I make this book one of the most successful book ever written by a Tamil. And I have a sales goal for how many units I want to sell. And my publisher said he never met an author who actually has a sales goal. And so I really want to do that. But there are beyond that documentaries, and maybe if there's a motion picture, that certainly is in my my radar. And anyway, that's too early to go that way. But I always said if it made it into a movie, I want Matt Damon to play me, but it's got to get a tan and get in shape. But really, just right now, trying to sell this book in every English-speaking language where Tamils live and where English-speaking people live. So that'd be UK, America, obviously Canada, Australia, and India, and Malaysia, and things like that. So it is starting to get a lot of traction. I do a lot of these kind of Zoom calls, and we are also. Do you know? I did not know this. The largest English book market in the world is India.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So that's where my focus as well, and also trying to get this translated into Tamil so that we can put that in the hands of many fellow Tamils like ourselves who can, speak English, because there are a lot of them out there as well. So I'm focused on all those different things, and then I got to work on the audiobook, which I'm starting next week. I will be reading my own story.
Wow.
And
I love audiobooks.
yes, and so yeah, there's many more things to take care of before I move on to what are the next project that I want to focus on.
Actually, this is a question from Arun, and actually, I don't think I've ever asked you from the time I've known you, which is you've gone through all this, a lot of bad memories from Sri Lanka. Have you ever gone back to visit at all?
Well, I went there once.
Or do you plan to?
And I don't know if you know this, in 2010, I was listed as a foreign enemy by Sri Lankan government.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm in that list of people who cannot enter the country. Then in 2014, I was informed that I'm free to go now. And something tells me you can't trust these people. So I'm not going to take my chances. Going to prison once is suffering enough. I'm not going to try that again. This time, if I do go inside, I'm never coming out. I know that for sure.
Well, I guess a good way to end off this conversation on a positive note is, for anybody kind of listening, because obviously you have a full-time, job, you have other personal obligations as a family man. Writing a book, like I said, we talked about it before, like the baby steps, but like it seems so big and like daunting to write a book, and like you went from a thought to fairly completed product in like 2 to 3 months. What kind of advice do you have for someone listening that is also considering a creative project, whether it's a book or something where they haven't started yet, or finding time to like put it together, or like organizing your thoughts? Just any feedback or advice to someone listening that is where you were 6 months ago.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's going to sound very boring advice, but you got to start somewhere, right? This is not it's not anything other than to say that, as I said earlier, when I sat down to write the first line of the book, there are many places will surprise you. And I wrote that down, and I said, what am I trying to say here? And so from that line, the whole book evolved. So, there's a Chinese proverb that says many steps are taken by standing still. I think, you have to start taking the step. And my biggest worry when I wrote this is that what if I start writing and all of a sudden I realize my whole storyline is wrong, and then go back. But there are some chapters we had to go rewrite here and there. But for the most part, if you're starting a project, just the thing is taking the decision to do it. That's it, right? So I think I did mention that I climbed one time on Kilimanjaro, and in an 8-day climb. And I remember thinking, how am I going to do this? Just standing there looking up and going, I can't believe I signed up to this. But it's just really taking the first step, whatever that is. And so in life, it's really, you don't get what you deserve. You deserve what you fight for. And you just got to fight. And I know you probably heard this, and for such a cliche line, fall down, get up, fall down, get up, and just keep doing it. And so this book was about that. I mean, I was crushed when when John told me this reads like a blog, go write again. And then when one of the publisher dropped me and said, this is a terrible transcript I read. This is awful. And I still have the email printed out because I want to look at it every day. I want to send him the book, the guy who declined me, with a nice note because I'm vindictive. But you know what? He gave me resolve to carry on with the project, even though he turned me down. And I had a great agent, Michael, who said to me, Roy, one thing I know in this business, nobody knows anything. Because Life of Pi got turned down by 32 publishers. And then we kept going, and then we ended up selling 12 million copies. And even if I sold a fraction of that, it's a mega success. And so when he told me that Life of Pi guy goes decline, 32 times, I knew that I was in good company. And so don't let anyone tell you that you can't. You got to keep doing it and try different avenues. If one doesn't work, try the other, but start somewhere.
Yeah, I think to wrap it up, I think if people look at the top 1% of books, and I think in different categories, they'd be surprised at the numbers, because the top 1%, I think, in publishing is not a big number. It might be like 20,000, 30,000, something like that. I don't know the exact number, but it was surprising when I found out. So I think your sales goal will probably get you to the 1% at least.
Well, if you're listening live, and if you're listening later after the replay, go out and buy a copy and give it to a friend or your family or your kid one day or kid today. This story will resonate with not only just to know where you guys we all came from, if you haven't really had the understanding of what happened to our people, but also really your first question, resilience, and how to fight through it, how to find opportunities, how to negotiate in a boardroom. So there's a business aspect to this as well. And then really also trying to better yourself every day. I'm still a flawed human being, nowhere near perfect. I'm so much better than I used to be. I still make dumb mistakes and I'm not perfect. But at the end of the day, the old saying, if there's a will, there's a way. And a lot of people told me that I can't do this. I can't write a book. A lot of people told me you can never be, as a brown person, be one of the senior person in the largest independent asset management company. I'm here. A lot of people fought me in boardrooms and thought they can take me down, but they couldn't take this Point Petro boy down. So just don't go down in a fight. And my line always being is that when you're on your back heel, don't negotiate, hit first. And in the boardroom, that's what they try to do. They get you on back heel and they try to make you negotiate. You hit first. And so you'll see the journey of a screwed up human being going through, trying to fix himself up, dealing with PTSD, dealing with nightmares. But at the end of the day, world has its own problem, and you got to fix your own. And it sounds cruel and unpragmatic, but it's what I learned. And some may disagree with my message, but that's fine. But I can only speak about my story and what worked for me. And so it will resonate to some and won't to the other, but that's my story.
Love it. And yeah, to your last point, I think the saying is better to be either hot or cold tea. It's
Yeah.
the worst to be lukewarm. So you can't be friends
Right.
with everyone. So thank you again, Roy, for jumping on, sharing your remarkable journey and kind of the story behind Prisoner 1056. I'll plug it in. I bought a book. I'm excited to read it. We'll include a link to those who kind of are interested. But and thank you guys as well who kind of tuned in live in terms of joining. And we'll make this available as well. And I'm your host, Era. And this was the December edition of the Tamil Innovators Spotlight. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.